I'm going to talk about for a brief moment on this in this year before we do Q&A about the secret to the connection, divine connection. The secret to divine connection. There are a lot of people out in the world who try to understand the mystery as to why some people can be so religious and others can't. And the ones who can't just don't get it because I don't understand. Are you doing this because you like to restrict yourself? You like to be a prude? You like to be hyper-religious? What's your motivation? What gets you going? And I'm telling you, and I think everyone in this room will realize, wow, this is a secret I've had, and I didn't know that I actually had this secret deep down inside of me, but it is the greatest secret to a divine connection. We all know, and it's great, a fantastic psychologist once said that discipline without a relationship breeds rebellion. Do you understand? And we all know in a practical sense that's true. If you have a child, you discipline them without a relationship, breeds rebellion. Even an animal, you discipline them and you beat them with a piece of paper, but you don't scratch their back and cuddle them or whatever you do. That animal at some point is going to develop a resentment towards you. Well, religion, with a strict code of discipline without a relationship with the creator of the universe, breeds rebellion. That's why a person can be raised from their whole life and then later just completely reject the whole thing because somehow they've missed it. In the book of Deuteronomy, Moses presents the Israelites and us with a commandment which is not found in the previous books of the Torah. When I share with you this, you'll understand. The commandment to love the Lord. Now, we often will share with someone, yes, we should love the Lord your God. We're supposed to love the Lord your God with all your heart. But to be honest with you, it's not talked about enough. And I'm not sure why. Maybe it's because we're trying not to emulate people that are on the other side that says God is what? Love. This new mitzvah is mentioned no less than 10 times in this Parashat, in Deuteronomy. This innovation goes hand in hand with another unique commandment. That is the declaration that the Lord loves the nation of Israel. And we've talked about this over and over, and I know that people in the nations who hear the term, God loves the Jewish people in Israel, like, well, he doesn't love me? What's the deal, right? They get offended over the whole thing. But in reality, God loves the nation of Israel. He has a covenant with Israel, and he also loves those who connect themselves to Israel. Now, it doesn't mean that he doesn't care for the nations. But he has a special sort of patriarchal love for Israel like a father has to a son. It says in Deuteronomy 4:37, and because he loved thy fathers and chose their seed after them and brought thee out of his presence with the great power out of Egypt. This declaration also emphasized by the repeated references in a number of places in this very book. Moses enumerates the Lord's behavior toward Israel from the time it was chosen and proves that his behavior is motivated by love. Over and over, Moses reminds the people, God did this because he loved you. He loves you. This love is so strong that it finds an expression even when speaking of the Lord's love for someone else. It says this, he doth execute justice for the fatherless and the widow and and loveth the stranger. Who is the stranger? The ger, in giving him food and raiment. The immediate context hints that perhaps the source of God's love for the stranger is his love for Israel when they were in Egypt. The reason why he tells Israel, love the stranger, is because he's saying, I loved you when you are a stranger. In Deuteronomy 10:18, it says, love ye therefore the stranger, for you were strangers, gerim, in the land of Egypt. Now, why does Moses find it relevant to emphasize the Lord's love. Why do you think it's so important? And this, to me, is the very clincher on understanding our connection, the secret connection to the divine nature of God. It is obvious explanation that this is the aim, is to inscribe upon the nation's soul the gratitude for the good that the Lord had bestowed upon them and throughout their past. This is the feeling of gratitude will work somewhat as a shield to prevent them from abandoning the Lord's path. So Moshe, with the intention of saying, I will be gone when they cross over the Jordan, somehow I've got to instill something so deep in them that they'll never abandon Hashem's path for them. They won't go off the derrick. They'll maintain their role. However, there's another important explanation which is less obvious. Moshe provides it when he voices a serious claim that the nation had made toward the Lord, which was first revealed in Deuteronomy. Interesting enough, we don't have this written in the Torah where it was said or when Moshe heard this. But he says this, and ye murmured, this is Deuteronomy 1st chapter, verse 27. He says, and you murmured in your hearts and said, because the Lord hated us. He had brought us forth out of the land of Egypt to deliver us into the hand of the Amorites to destroy us. Oh my goodness, what does that tell you about what was going on in the mind of the Israelites? Where did Moses hear such a claim? It's not even written anywhere in the Torah that they even said that. But he said, they said it. So somehow he either overheard it, etc. Well, it is essential to underscore that the book of Deuteronomy is a reproach from the beginning to the end. In it, Moshe seizes the opportunity of his approaching death to ingrain in the nation the obligation of the Lord's words, even in his absence. He does not just recount the past events, but tries to explain them. In the first story mentioned by him, the story of the spies, he strives to find the source of the bitterness that brought the nation consistently stray from the proper path and defy the Lord. Deep down inside, you can see Moshe attempting to rectify why is it, after seeing the outstretched hand of God and seeing the power at Mount Sinai, how is it they constantly keep going off the derrick? Why the rebellion of Korah? Why the complaint in the wilderness with the serpents? What in the world is going on? We can assume that Moses understood that all the complaints of Israel arose from the feeling of dissatisfaction with the Lord's leadership, which is expressed by the words that says this, because the Lord hated us. Now I want you to follow me very carefully, as there is no real basis for this feeling. Over and over, God shows them incredible favor and mercy. Over and over, he continues to show his loving kindness to his people. In the spirit of our sages, we can say this: do not accuse your fellow man of a blemish that you yourself have. There's a psychological term that we call, in modern psychology, it's called projecting your feelings, right? So a thief always thinks that people are stealing from him. A cheater always thinks their spouse is cheating, right? So this is just how it works. A person with the greatest flaws always projects it upon another person. A person who's angry is always accusing somebody else of being angry at them. A liar is always accusing somebody else of lying to them. And in this case, it seems that the nation of Israel was projecting the fact that they do not love God. This is a huge accusation. But Moshe is attempting at some level to find out why do they feel like God hates them, when he's showing them other things. In psychoanalysis, projection is identified as a person's defense mechanism in which a person projects the negative side of his personality into the world outside of him and attributes them to other people. Korah accused Moshe of what? Do what? Nepotism. And in reality, Korah, what? My sons and I can do just as good as you. Right? Same thing. The psychologist Erik Erikson claimed that additionally the projection is usually perverse and filled with animosity and fear. It is, however, a kernel of truth, since it is not by pure chance that the projecting person's attributes that specific quality to the object that he is projecting it upon. So when Israel says, or when Moshe overhears them say, or when Israel says that God must hate us, what are they saying? By this definition, it is clear why Moshe emphasizes and exemplifies the Lord's love to the nation. He aims to entirely refute the claim of the hatred embedded in the nation's heart. Even if it is not openly manifested, he intentionally calls for a mutiny in the relationship and asks there be a loving relationship toward the Lord. In the end, the love for the Lord will be the most important expression, internalizing the knowledge that the nation is loved by God. And in reaction to the nation, they will declare, the Holy One, blessed be He, we love you. Ultimately, what Moshe was trying to do is inject a supernatural, unique love of the people toward their God. While it is true that the commandment to love the Lord is absolute and not conditional upon an individual's personal fate, to the point that one has to be ready to give up his life or her life for their love for God, the basis for this commandment is the realization that the feeling of love is mutual, since the Lord's loved each individual of Israel as part of the love of the nation. And when I talk of God's love for Israel, I'm also including those of the nations who attach themselves to Israel. Moshe had to explain the grain of truth which underlines the bad feelings of the nation. He didn't come out and accuse them of not loving God. But in his emphasis on you need to love God with all your heart, which is a commandment not seen in any other place, what is he trying to instill? Moses depicts the starvation, the hardship in the vast and horrible desert in Deuteronomy 8:3 as veiled love. He sort of talks about it in such a way that says in verse 5, chapter 8, says, bear in mind that the Lord your God disciplines you as a man disciplines his son. If the nation would internalize that the Lord's attitude is like the father toward the son, maybe their attitude could change and that their love would be the same as a son with a father. My grandchildren, the twins, had how many shots apiece? 4? 3? And the doctor wanted to give them 6 or something. And they cried and kvetched for half the day. They're too little. They don't understand. And all day long you could tell them, well, it's because mommy and daddy loves you that you received this shot. But they're too immature and can't communicate to even know that. But later on in their life, when they reach a level of maturity, somehow they will be able to understand, my mom and dad knows what's best for me. And even though it's not fun, they love me. Moshe realized that they're at the place of their spiritual maturity where they need to hear this. They need to understand that all the hardship that you experienced in your life had a purpose. Now, I know that we're reading in the book, Emunah, help me. Living Emunah. We talk about everything is by the hand of Hashem. If I hit my toe, and this happens, and if I do this, that happens. We have some out there in the rabbinical world of teaching that will say something like, if you sin, then it's a positive thing because then there was a purpose behind it. No, we have to realize that there is also free choice, and we can make up terrible mistakes. But what is the difference between a person who has a deep drive to study Torah, to do mitzvah, to have to discipline themselves according to Torah ethics, to constantly want to make character changes, and the person who just doesn't even think about it? What is it?
The person trying to do that or going down that path is attempting to overcome his animalistic nature.
Right. And why is he doing it? Because he loves the Creator.
Yeah.
So what is the secret to a divine connection? And I hate to oversimplify it, guys, but I'm just telling you, it's this simple. If you do not love the Creator of the universe, then you have to develop a love for Him. How do you develop a love for Him? Is through knowing Him. We know that this love that God prescribes for his people is the kind of love or knowledge you know your spouse. It's intimacy. Well, you'd say, well, how can I be intimate with the creator of the universe who has no form? He doesn't have any limitations. He's everywhere at one time. Then where is this intimacy? Intimacy comes from knowing. Knowing comes from Torah. Studying Torah, knowing the essence of God through the Torah is what brings us closer to Hashem. The more you study, the more intimate you feel. The more intimate you feel, the more love you have for the Creator. Oftentimes we hear wonderful rabbis tell the B'nai Noach, and you've heard me say it over and over, we've said it here. Well, you do mitzvah, it doesn't matter because you don't get any credit for it. And what is the next words out of the B'nai Noach's mouth? Somebody help me. We're not doing it for credit.
We're going to do it anyway.
We're doing it for what?
We love Hashem.
Love Hashem.
I guess that's one thing that they don't understand.
They don't understand. So what I'm trying to do is encourage the B'nai Noach to continue to love Hashem with your heart and to inspire the Jewish community that may not quite understand it. They're sort of mechanically going through this, but they're just not getting into it. To say, love Hashem with your whole heart. See, that's the secret. The secret isn't kippot and tzitzit for us. The secret is the fact that one day we begin to have an earnest desire to know God and to know Him as He wants to be known. And in that way, it awakened a passionate love for the Creator. And it's so unique. It's the secret. We do what we love. Every human being does what they love. Right? I can't imagine a race car driver driving on the track and going, I hate this job.
Punching this clock is horrible.
Yeah, it's terrible. Right? It's just horrible. Can you imagine an artist who loves art? Or how about an artist? Can you imagine an artist doing any fantastic work if he didn't like art? It wouldn't happen. Right? And I look at people like the Wobbies and other people who serve the Jewish community with all their heart and their effort. These guys are not dummies. They could be doing an amazing thing in the world, right? Be making a lot of money. But yet they are expending themselves for service to Hashem. Why? Because they love Hashem. And they're attempting it somehow to get an otherwise secular Jewish community to love Hashem. How do we fall in love with Hashem? We fall in love with Hashem when we realize how much He loves us. We realize how much He gives or cares for us, and how often we fail Him, and yet He continues to uplift us and to bear us up. We're reminded, as a matter of fact, I'm going to quote this here. It says, the combination of the Lord's love to us with our love for Him is explicitly conveyed a few times in the blessing with which our sages established before reading the Shema, and the blessing called Ahava Rabbah, and you have chosen us from among every people and language. You have brought us close to your great name forever in truth, to give thanks to you and to proclaim your oneness with love. Blessed are you, O Lord, who chooses His people, Israel, with love. You see, the secret to a divine connection is loving Hashem with your whole heart. And if you are finding yourself empty and not in love and wondering what to do, fan the flames of love through your intimacy with Him. Intimacy in Hitzpah, personal prayer. Intimacy in studying Torah, because you will never know the Master of the universe without knowing His essence, which comes from the Torah. Study Torah, the positive and negative commandments. Understand His divine nature and His attributes through the actual commandments and laws itself. That concludes this Shurim, and we'll go into our question and answer period.